So today in 6.6, we're going to look at solving again like we did in the previous section. This time I am going to show you how to use your calculators. Now I want to warn you before we get started, there will be a problem or two on the test where I do not let you use your calculator. The ones that we do today are the type that I would let you use your calculator on, because you'll only be able to use your calculator as a tool. You won't be able to use your calculator to solve the whole thing. So heads up on that. So here's our first problem. Since we're going to use our calculator, I'm going to pull that up and I'm going to graph this in my calculator. Okay, so looking at mine right now, I had zoomed in the last time I used this calculator, so I'm going to go to Zoom Standard number 6, and then it'll just set it back on a 10 by 10, which I think is probably better for me, because I don't really know what mine's going to look like. And then I'll go to Y equals, and I'm going to clear that out and put mine in. So x to the third minus 2x squared plus 5x minus 10. Okay, and then I'll graph that thing. Okay, now this is an x to the third problem. We should have 3 answers, which means we should have 3 places where it crosses the x-axis. I'm looking at this and I only see 1 right there at 2. What that means is that your other answers, my other 2, because I'm supposed to have 3 total, I only have 1 here, so my other 2 answers are imaginary. If they're imaginary, they're not going to show up on your coordinate grid. This is the kind of thing I would let you use your calculator on, because you can only get 1 off of your calculator. 2. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to do synthetic division with the 1 answer I was able to get with my calculator, 2. Now remember how in the last section when we did these without the calculator, we found the list of possibilities and we guessed and checked till we found one that worked? 2 is going to be the one that works. This time I was able to get away without doing my list of possibilities because I'm letting you use your calculator. Okay, so I'm doing my synthetic division here. Okay, there's my remainder of 0. I knew that was going to happen because of where it crossed the x-axis on my calculator, on my graph. So I'm going to write out what I have here. So x squared plus 0x plus 5. And I'm going to solve that. Now typically we solve it by quadratic formula or by factoring. This one, I think I can move the 5 to the other side and take the square root. Now remember your plus or minus I root 5. Now there's 2 answers. It is absolutely no surprise to me that those 2 answers are imaginary because they weren't on my graph, which means they're imaginary here. Now also, it's not at all surprising to me that the 2 answers are conjugates of each other, because remember in 6.5 how we had the conjugate situation going on? The reason for that is your plus or minus here. So here are my 3 answers. Now, see how you still have to do your work here? There's no way I'm going to let you use your calculator on one that you can just look at it and read all of the answers off. Well, maybe I would let you use your calculator, but I definitely would give you some on the no calculator part that you have to do it this way. I'm guaranteeing you that. That's not even a question. Make sure you can do the process without your calculator, or with. Okay, so let's do 2 more of these. Okay, so we have this right here. I'm going to go through, same thing, I'm going to graph this. So I'm going to go to the y equals, and I have 3x to the third plus x squared minus x plus 1. Now this is an x to the third, so I should have 3 answers total. It looks like one of those is at negative 1. Now if you're not sure, you can always go look on your table, and at negative 1 it's 0. So if it's hard to see or something, go check it on the table, or you could do your left bound, right bound thing if you needed to. For me, I usually, if I can just eyeball it, I do that because I am going to really be checking it here. When I do my synthetic division, if I didn't see it correctly, I won't get the 0 as a remainder. So I kind of have a double check here. So I usually just kind of eyeball it and then come over here and do synthetic division. Okay. So there is my 0. That's good. I expected that. Here's what I have left. Now, I don't think this one will factor. I'm quite sure it won't. And most of them, if you've only got one answer that's real, the imaginaries you can't get by factoring. So typically, if it's imaginary, you're going to do quadratic formula, and I don't think this one will factor. So, I'll do quadratic formula. I was thinking about whether it could factor or not, but it won't. So negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And I'm going to simplify this thing down. So this is a negative 12, and 4 minus 12 is a negative 8. Now, it's not too surprising to me that I have a negative inside a square root because it's going to end up being an imaginary answer. Okay, I can simplify down the square root of 8. So I have 4 plus or minus 2 root 2, and I need to put my I in there, so I'll put that in right there. And then I can reduce with the 2 here. So 2 plus or minus I root 2. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. Okay, I just made a mistake though. I'm making lots of mistakes on the podcast that I've done today. Let me know if you see any others in here so I can go back and fix them. This should be a 6 right here. And then I'm still going to reduce, but it's not going to reduce quite as well. Two-thirds and 1/3. Okay, so 1 there. Alright, so lots of little mistakes that I made in there. Hopefully it's just quadratic formula, so I think you'll be okay with that. So here then are my answers. Negative 1 and 1 plus I root 2 over 3 and 1 minus I root 2 over 3. Now again, you'll see the conjugates here. You'll also see that on my calculator, it only crossed the x-axis 1 time. I needed 3 answers total, so the other 2 answers were imaginary. It's not too surprising because they won't show up on the graph. Okay, let's do one more of these. Okay, now first of all, looking at this one, you will have 4 answers on this one instead of just 3 because it's an x to the 4th. Let's go through and let's graph it. Okay, so x to the 4th minus 2x to the 3rd minus 5x squared plus 8x plus 4. Okay, and graph this thing. Okay, now when I'm looking at this, it's pretty easy for me to tell that it crosses here at -2. If I go to my table, it verifies that. -2 is one of my answers. I'm going to write it here so I don't forget that because I have a bad memory. Now, pulling it up, one thing that I actually noticed here on the table that was a little hard to see on the graph part is that 2 is also a 0. Now let me go back over to the graph. See how it's a little bit hard to see what happens there? But it did give me that information on the table. So I've got 2 answers there, so that's good. Now I want you to look at this, and it crosses the x-axis 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Now it's an x to the 4th problem, so I should have 4 answers. It crosses the x-axis 4 times, which means none of those answers are imaginary. They're all real. However, this one right here is not at a whole number. And I am quite certain this one right here is not. This is at 2, I think. I don't think this one's at a whole number either. So this one, you can kind of see where it crosses the x-axis, but it's not going to be values that you can get exact numbers on. Now, the best you could do would be to do second calc, find a 0, and then left bound, right bound. We've done this before. Now, what that could get you is a decimal approximation. It gave me a decimal approximation here, but at some point the calculator rounded. Unless I ask you for a decimal approximation, I do not want one. I want these answers in simplified radical form. That means give me square roots, but simplify them. I don't want a decimal. Now, the reason for this is the same reason as I might give you some of the ones with imaginary numbers on the calculator section. I want you to be able to do the process by hand. I may let you use the calculator to streamline that guessing and checking. I am not going to let you use the calculator to do the entire problem. I'm promising you that. And I'm going to be honest with you. If you put this right here as one of your answers, I'm going to count it as wrong as if you had left it blank. I want a simplified radical as an answer. Okay, so we have 2 of our 4 answers. We've got -2 and we've got +2. So let's use those. It doesn't matter which one you start with. I'm just going to start with the -2 because I wrote it down first. And I'm going to do synthetic division with it. Now, if this is a 0, and I know it is from the graph, my remainder should be 0. Okay, so let's go through our process here. Okay, surprise, surprise, remainder of 0. Now, if I were to write this out, this would have an x to the 3rd power in it. It's still too big for me to factor or do quadratic formula on. So I'm going to use the second answer that I got off the calculator. Now, like I said, it doesn't matter what order you do these in. If you started with a 2 and then with the -2, you would get the same thing when you get down to the bottom. You'd have a little bit different work in the process, but you'd have the same answer in the end. Okay, so there's my second answer. Let me write out what I have here. So x squared minus 2x minus 1. And I'll factor or quadratic formula to find my last answer. Now, I don't think factoring will work here, so I'll do quadratic formula. So negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so going through to simplify down right here, I have 4 plus 4, which means I have 2 plus or minus square root of 8. And I'll simplify down the square root of 8. Now you'll notice no negatives inside my square root because there's no imaginary numbers this time. I knew that was going to happen. I knew that was going to happen because of the calculator. The calculator had all 4 answers that I could see, which means they might be messy, like 1 plus or minus root 2, but they're not going to be imaginary. So here are my 4 answers, the ones I got off the calculator: 1 plus root 2 and 1 minus root 2. Now, just because I want y'all to see something, I'm going to go back over to the calculator and I'm going to specifically use the 1 minus root 2. Okay, now y'all remember when we found this value and we did the left bound, right bound thing, it was negative 0.41, etc. Now I'm going to just go and I'm going to put the answer 1 minus root 2 in my calculator. Now see how it's the same value as the one that I found on my calculator? If I were to find this one, 1 plus root 2, it would be the same as whatever that value turned out to be, which I didn't do the left bound, right bound on there, but it would be the same value. Now remember, I don't want decimals, so you'll be able to check these once you have this form here, but you'll still have to go through your process. Now, here's the deal with these problems. They're long. There's lots of places to make mistakes, as you can tell, because I've made a lot of mistakes today. However, the process is not so bad. So kind of if you need to watch some of these problems multiple times to make sure you get the concept down, great, go for it. But make sure you get that process down.